We are covering the OSPF designated router and backup designated router election process for your CCNA exam. On multi-access networks like Ethernet, where many routers can communicate on the same segment, OSPF elects a designated router, or DR, and a backup designated router, the BDR, to create a central point for exchanging routing information. This prevents a chaotic situation where every router forms a full neighbor adjacency with every other router, which would lead to an overwhelming amount of LSA flooding. All other routers on that segment, known as DROTHERs, only form full adjacencies with the DR and BDR, drastically cutting down on unnecessary OSPF traffic. The election process itself is a prime target for exam questions, and it only happens on multi-access network types. The first criterion is the OSPF interface priority, a value from 0 to 255. The router with the highest priority on the segment wins the DR election, and the second highest becomes the BDR. By default, all routers have a priority of 1. A classic exam trap involves the priority value of 0. If you set a router's interface priority to 0, it becomes ineligible to participate in the election. If all routers have the same priority, which is the default situation, the CCNA exam will test you on the tiebreaker, the highest router ID. The router with the numerically highest router ID becomes the DR, and the second highest becomes the BDR. Remember, the router ID is determined first by the manual router ID command, then by the highest IP address on an active loopback interface, and finally by the highest IP address on an active physical interface. Here is the most critical point of confusion you must master for the exam. The DR and BDR election is non-preemptive. This means once a DR is elected, it remains the DR until it goes down. Even if a new router comes online later with a much higher priority or router ID, it will not take over the DR role. For example, if router A with a priority of 100 is the DR and router B comes online with a priority of 200, router A remains the DR. A new election only occurs if the existing DR fails. In that case, the BDR is immediately promoted to DR and a new election is held to select a new BDR. To remember the election rules under pressure, use this phrase: priority is decisive but not preemptive. Priority wins, the router ID is the tiebreaker, and the process is non-preemptive. On the exam, you'll see topology diagrams and be asked to identify the DR and BDR based on given priorities and IP addresses. You will also see what-if scenarios testing the non-preemptive nature. You also need to know that DROTH routers will form a full adjacency with the DR and BDR, but will remain in a two-way state with other DROTHERs. For free practice questions, AI-powered explanations, and more exam prep tools, visit openexamprep.com. That's openexamprep, all one word, .com.